Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head over to Belgium once again and have a taste of a beer from Ghent. And this is actually quite a new and interesting brewery because they don't use hops in their beers at all. So we're going to go to Gentse Stadtsbrouwerij and have a taste of the Gruut Witbier. So these guys use Gruut in their beer as the bittering agent. And this is quite an interesting idea. It's an old medieval idea, and I will tell you a little bit of that as I take you through the history of the brewery. So I'll just do that for 2 or 3 minutes, but if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the description for you below to have a look at, and it's available in French, English and also in Flemish too. It's got its own translations, and there's also a link down there to my other reviews that hopefully I can add from Gentse Stadtsbrouwerij in the fairly near future, because this is the very first time I'm actually trying one of their beers, and it's the very first beer that has Gruut in it rather than hops that I'm trying, so should be quite an interesting review for you today. But anyway, to tell you about the brewery, Gentse Stadtsbrouwerij was founded in Ghent in 2009 by Aniek de Splinter. Now Aniek comes from 2 families who were actually heavily involved in brewing, and her mum and dad had actually worked on several beer brands including Young's Pale Ale, Dentegrims, Liefmans and Lucifer. So as you can see, her family does actually have quite a very good brewing pedigree, if you like. So quite an interesting brewing family, I have to admit. But all of the beers in this town, as I said to you, are brewed using Gruut instead of hops as the bittering agent. And the idea behind this comes from the fact that the city of Ghent was actually divided. As you'll know if you know anything about Belgium, the country is essentially half French in the south and then half Flemish or kind of Dutch in the north, and they've also got a little bit of a German enclave as well. But the thing that was interesting about this, in Ghent, on the right bank you had the Flemish, who used the typical ingredients such as hops in their beer, but on the left bank it was ruled by the French, so the brewers there used a mix of herbs or Gruut in their beers. So the landlords apparently used to tax the beer on the amount of herbs that were used in the brew, and these beers were known as Gruut or Gruit, if you want to put a bit more of a kind of Dutch accent on it, I believe, or a Flemish accent I should say. But apparently the combination of these herbs was different from region to region, and so you would get various different tastes of these beers, and of course within that you do have the various different styles of beer that you can get. So a very, very interesting brewery that they're actually taking this kind of medieval tradition and bringing it into modern beer, so kudos to Aniek de Splinter for that. But if you do go and check out the brewery website, you'll see that they've got their own cafe and things like that, their own little beer cafe and restaurant, so you can go and check that out. They also do brewery tours, and also you can go there and brew your own beer. So as I say, go and have a wee read at the website and you will get an idea of what they're all about. But these days they do have 5 different styles of beer. So you have this guy, which is the wit beer, you have the blonde beer, the amber, the brune, and also the inferno as well, which is quite an interesting one, so do check that one out for yourself. But anyway, let's get on to the tasting of this beer itself. It is a 5.0% wit beer, as you might have guessed. It's got quite a cool label as well, so I'll just bring up the camera and check that you're seeing this before we get it open there. So it actually reminds me a little bit of what's the power thing that they have in the Captain America movies and the Thor movies, the Tesseract or something you would call it, I'm not sure, but it looks really quite nice actually. It's very nicely presented, and it does have a sort of ancient Belgian seal on the bottle cap there, but it's actually, this bottle cap's been a bit faded away, but it looks very, very nice. And there's the top label on the top of it there, but it looks very nice, and it says on the side of it, Gentse Stadtsbrouwerij has revived this ancient tradition with Gruut Witbier. Enjoy its natural cloudiness, white colour and refreshing crisp finish. Gruut is an ancient Flemish coin. In the medieval Ghent, brewers used Gruuts to pay taxes on the richness of their brew. So the Gruut is a coin. I guess that's what the symbol is then. It actually looked, I thought it was just a kind of cool design, but no, it must be the ancient Flemish coins, and that'll be the outline of one of them. So hopefully I can actually get another one of these and maybe show you that symbol a little bit better in the video. But anyway, let's get this guy open and we'll get on with the tasting. So a nice smoky opening there on this one actually, but you can see the natural cloudiness of this beer. Doesn't actually have much of aroma just from when you're pouring it, but I'm sure it will actually have a fair wee bit, because the Belgian beers always have a really nice big, you can smell it now that it's settled actually, you can smell the kind of typical Belgian-y bready yeast that you would expect off this beer. So as you can see, it's actually poured a very nice sort of pale golden straw colour. You can see it quite well on the camera, I've got it open there, but it's got a nice sort of 2/3 finger of a frothy white head there. It's actually poured really nice. That's one of the cleanest beers I've ever seen. There's a good little bit of sediment particles just floating around in there, but it looks really nice. They're all very, very small, but there are a few bigger ones just floating around too. There's a little bit of carbonations visible too, so it's got a few little bubbles just going up towards the bottom of the head, but there's not really any big ones sticking to the side of the glass or anything like that. But overall, it looks a very, very nice beer. So let's have a smell of this one. It's quite interesting actually. It smells very, very grassy actually. But as is typical with a Belgian beer, you've got a nice kind of big sort of bready and yeasty character underpinning the whole aroma. But you can get a little bit of wheat in there and maybe some sort of coriander kind of flavours. It's the typical Belgian wit beer notes. There's a little bit of clove maybe. But overall you can get a sort of grassy and aromatic aroma from this one. That is actually quite prominent. But the grass kind of smells a little bit sweet, so maybe that is the typical aroma of the Gruut. I've never sort of smelled a beer that's used this in it before, so it's quite new to me. But there's a bit of citrusy lemon in there too, and you can just get the idea from the aroma that it is a little bit herbal. The citrus and the grass aren't quite as poignant as they are in Belgian wit beers that must obviously use hops. So it's quite an interesting one. So if you do try this for yourself, just take a little bit of time and take in the aroma of this one. I say that for all the beers, but this one's particularly interesting because of the ingredients that are used in it. So it smells quite nice, typical elements of the Belgian wit beer like I say, but it does have an interesting point that the sort of grassy and aromatic and citrusy character isn't quite as poignant. It is more of a herbal aroma. But without further ado, let's have a taste of the Gruut Witbier from Gentse Stadtsbrouwerij in Ghent in Belgium. Slanje. That's actually really, really nice. It's nowhere near as sharp as some of the Belgian wit beers can be. Some of the Belgian wit beers I think can be kind of overpowering and quite cloying if you like, but this guy is done very, very nicely. So I'm actually finding this beer to be very, very smooth. So, as is typical with a regular Belgian wit beer, if you like, it's got a nice big bready and yeasty character in there. The wheat in this one is actually very smooth, and it just gives another dimension to the beer, if you like. So your tongue is getting blanketed with this big yeasty bready character. You just get a blanket of that completely envelopes the middle of your palate there, and you've got a nice slightly yeasty sweetness in there, and just a little bit of wheat as well. The wheat is actually quite sweet, but it's got a nice kind of slightly coriander and maybe a little bit of clove in there too. It's just a teeny little bit spicy, but it is more of a sweet thing. It's almost as if the malt base is very, very well blended together. It's just a kind of nice infused flavour, if that makes sense, rather than having all of these different kind of quite poignant characteristics. It's a very nice blend of flavour, the malt base in this beer. Yeah, as you move out towards the edge of the tongue, at the front of the palate, you're getting just a little bit of a kind of citrusy flavour comes to the very forefront of the tongue there. You just feel this little oily bubble moving away from that big kind of bready and yeasty malt base and just moving towards the front of the tongue, the sort of front curve there. But around the edges of the tongue, it is actually quite dry. And it's quite an interesting flavour that you're getting around the edge, because that's normally where your hop characteristics would come out in the beer, with all that dry character. So it is a bit like a sort of grassy mouthfeel, but at the same time it's just a little bit more herbal. It's not quite as sharp and citrusy and aromatic as you would normally expect from the wit beer. It is just a little bit more herbal, and it's just not as sharp a flavour, if that makes sense. It's a lot smoother, and it actually goes, it's a very well blended flavour, this beer, just even if you go between what you would expect from the hop, which obviously in this case is Gruut characteristics, to the malt base, and the beer, the whole flavour of the beer just goes together just like that. It goes very, very well. The nice dry characteristics of the beer around the edge are very nice and very herbal, and it's a very smooth flavour. So it's actually very like the aroma. This one, this beer is really well done. This is one of my, I would actually go as far as saying that this is probably one of the best Belgian wit beers I've tried actually. But yeah, it's really, really nicely done actually. I would really love to try a few of the other ones in Anique's series and see how they turn out, because normally you always expect a beer to have this kind of huge hoppy character, especially the wit beers. You always expect this huge hoppy and dry kind of cloying bitterness from a wit beer, and so that can actually put some people off the style, but this one is just a lot milder and it's a far more infused flavour, so it's a really interesting variant of the style. I have to admit, I would definitely drink this if I went to Belgium again. It's quite hard to get this beer over here, and I think I actually brought this one back from the Netherlands with me, so I might be I'm not certain about that. I can't remember where I got this beer, but it is definitely very nice, and I would recommend that you try it because it's got all that interesting characteristic about it. But in terms of the mouthfeel, this one, I'd say it's quite light-bodied, perhaps pushing the mid-bodied spectrum. The carbonation on it, I would say, it's actually quite smooth. Yeah, it starts out quite active, and then it just smooths the beer out nicely and makes the good transition from the sharper kind of citrusy flavours that you get when the liquid's actually in your mouth, and it just helps the beer make the transition very nicely into the very smooth and well blended flavour that I was talking about. So quite an active carbonation at the start, but overall very smoothing. But there's a big, nice, kind of mild and slightly sweet yeasty character into this one. It's a very kind of nicely blended and infused malt base, but the interesting kind of slightly bitter character is really really nice. It's kind of mild grassy flavour, grassy and herbal infused flavour, and as I say, the whole flavour of this beer just makes a very good transition. It blends together beautifully. That's all I can say about that. I keep repeating myself, but it's just a very, very interesting beer, and I'm quite glad I got to review it. But around the edges of the tongue, particularly towards the back actually, you are getting quite a little bit of dryness around that, and that's kind of pushing its way gradually into the tongue between sips of this beer. So overall, I'd say this is a really, really nice beer, and I would go as far as saying that this is perhaps one of it's probably my favourite Belgian wit beer that I've tried actually, because the flavour just blends together so well. Sometimes I find with these beers that they can be a little bit too yeasty or a little bit too kind of hoppy and citrusy, but this one for me just perfectly hits the spot. Other people will have different opinions of this beer. As I always say, the taste of beer is quite subjective. Different people enjoy different things, but for me, this is a very nice one, and I would recommend that you try it, if nothing else, for the interesting kind of Gruut characteristics that you like in this beer. So it is really quite interesting, and I would recommend that you try it. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. It's been cool to do another Belgian one, especially one that has a very interesting brewing heritage. So please check the brewery out for yourself, and let me know in the comments section your own thoughts on this beer. I always like hearing from my viewers, and please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff, and I can guarantee you that I'll be going back to this brewery at some point, hopefully in the not too distant future, and there will be many more Belgian beer reviews for you to come. But anyway, slange you for now. Cheers.